that.
Sorry, I forgot to say I was recording.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm very excited to hear that these small businesses are just like I thought and involved in a lot of things. But I usually know that one of those activities is your major focus, right? And what I wanted to talk to you today is a little bit about what I have learned over the years. I've been in business for about 30 years. And I started very young, right? and we do work with the federal government and state government and local government, as well as the private sector. So when we do a lot of our training and advice and things like that, we are mindful that the different kinds of industries have different kinds of requirements, and that some things make more sense when you're doing this kind of activity versus another. But one thing is for sure, that in order for you to be successful, you have to have the right team, and you have to mind a very important piece of what makes or breaks a small business, which is your cash flow. And so even in the hiring process, you're looking at, what does this mean to my cash flow, and how do I offset that with needing to have the right people in the right places? So that's what we're going to talk about. And I have a PowerPoint slide presentation that I'm going to use to talk from. I would like to suggest that, and I know, Marilyn, you can tell me if this is feasible, that if you have questions, you can put it in the chat, or you can wait until break points and I'll say, are there any questions? But if you want to go ahead and put them in the chat, you can. Marilyn, is that possible? Can they do that? Yeah, you're on mute.
Yep, they all have access.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to do a little technology here to share my screen. Hold on a second. There you go. I think this will get me there. Can you see my screen? You're on mute. Is that a yes? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I see you see my other slides too, but let me see if I can accommodate so you don't see everything all at once. And I don't quite know how to get rid of this. See, I should know that, right? Being IT, you get used to people helping you out, and then you lose it. So, well, anyhow, let me see if I can.
On the top there, next to the refresh button or the back button, is that?
Where, here?
To the left, to the right. Well, two right over. Nope, the very next one.
This one. There you go. Thank you.
That percent, that might be it.
Yay, thank you. Hey, you're hired.
Yeah. Entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, so this is part of our Pathways to Business Success program for the Gaithersburg-Germantown Chamber of Commerce. Maryland has the plan, and the plan is putting together different topics that are really useful to all our small businesses. Again, Carmen Ortiz Larson is my name. I'm a business consultant, and I'm presenting this thing. So let me move on. So a lot of times, so I heard what you all said, so I'm going to insert some of the things that I heard you say in when I talked to you. And one of the questions that I think when we are running our businesses is, usually we start off as ourselves, or ourselves and our daughter, or ourselves and our husband, and or ourselves and a friend, and we say, okay, we have this thing that we want to do, whether it's a food service or a janitorial or an IT service, and we say, well, when should we, Marilyn, Chris is somebody's waiting to be admitted. I can click on that. Okay, when should I hire staff versus hiring contractors? Now I'm going to make a differentiation here. I heard some of you talking interchangeably about having employees, but then they're 1099 employees. So I'm going to clarify that when I'm talking about employees, I'm talking about what I call W-2 employees. And when I talk about 1099 people, I'm talking about contractors, or I might say 1099 hires. And I'm going to talk during this presentation a little bit about what's the difference and where does it make sense to have employees versus 1099s, or 1099s versus employees. Okay. And sometimes you might have a mix of those, but it's important that we understand what the consequences are in terms of our reporting requirements and the law, right? And how does that impact our business and our direction that we want to take? So when should I hire staff versus contractors? Well, sometimes you have to hire employees or staff because it's required by contract. So the contract does not allow you to put in a proposal that where you have 1099 staff. Because this happens with the government contracts a lot, because the government views a 1099 hire as an independent agent. And so they can perceive that 1099 person as a subcontractor, and therefore they cannot control what they're doing, and they cannot control that person, how capable are they to deliver the work. So sometimes contracts tell you that you have to propose W-2 staff, right? So sometimes it's required by contract. So then you hire staff. In general, this is my suggestion, my viewpoint, because of some of how I've seen people sometimes get in trouble. I generally suggest that you consider hiring staff, full-time staff, and that part-time staff might be a little bit different. If you're earning more than $300,000 in gross revenue, that sounds like a lot, but money goes very quickly when you start hiring staff and growing. One of the first things that I did when I started my business is that I went around the county and knocked on people's doors. You can't knock on people's doors anymore, but it used to be able to do that, or make a call and say, can I come and see you? I'm starting a company, or I just started a company, and I want to talk to the CEO about what their experiences were and what they suggest. And so one of the things I thought was a great suggestion was the fact that we have to always keep in mind that it costs money to grow our business. And so we have to know that we need to be putting some money aside. So you start a business and you work it yourself with your spouse, your partner, or your business partner, and you start making money, right? One of the things you have to tell yourself is, how much money am I going to keep for us? How much money am I going to reinvest in the business? And how much money am I going to set aside for the rainy day? So you have to look at it like that, and start planning on bringing people on as a hire or as a W-2 when you're earning more than 300,000, but maybe that for you that might be 100,000, but I wouldn't suggest if it's less than 100,000, because now you're interfering with your revenue. Okay, so you also want to know that if you're going to think about employees, full-time employees, you would like to anticipate that you have steady work for 12 months or more. This does not cover if you want an intern for a little bit, for a short term, or a temp, or a part-time person. But if you are thinking of bringing somebody on full-time, you need to think that you're pretty sure that you're going to have enough work for 12 months or more. Doesn't mean you have all the signed contracts, but you're pretty positive that you are almost there. And I would suggest that you've been in business for 24 months or more, or that you have the equivalent of 6 months or more anticipated fixed expenses in the bank, and that you're able to secure a line of credit. So why is that? And the reason that is that you want to make sure that you don't run into an immediate problem of you can't cover payroll. And payroll is more than what you're paying the person, and we'll look at that. So if I hire somebody and I'm going to pay them $15 an hour or $20 an hour, that may be something I can do this month or next month, but it may be that on my third month, I have to tell them, I'm going to be about a week late paying you, or, because you've now gotten them so involved, you don't want to let them go because you've trained them, and now you're stuck with that. So I suggest these things so you don't get into a jam. The other reason for hiring somebody is, and you don't qualify for any, you said, no, I don't have these things. It's if you are putting only yourself and your business partner on payroll. And I'm going to suggest that for me anyhow, my experience was that I put myself on payroll because when I had put myself on a 1099, I wasn't necessarily very good at making sure that I was sending that money over to the IRS. And so I was so focused on building my business, and anytime I had to pay for my own personal expenses, I'd draw money out of the company. And at the end of the year, I owed all this money to the IRS that I couldn't pay on. So I made a conscious decision of putting myself on the payroll so that I didn't have that problem. And, you know, putting yourself on the payroll doesn't mean that you actually have to draw that payroll every time. You could have, you could decide you're gonna put yourself on payroll, but guess what? This week I can't pay myself, all right? Or I can only pay your payroll can be variable. It's not like you hired somebody for this. You're not committing to pay this much because it's yourself and you already know, so you can draw. But all that does is it especially if you hire a payroll company, it automatically deducts all the taxes and somebody else is taking care of that. And you don't have to worry about it. Because it's not just the taxes that you withhold, but there's a whole bunch of other paperwork that goes along with it. So anyhow, that's my other idea of when you want to put somebody in the payroll. Okay, so up to now, we're talking about hiring versus 1099. So how do I find the right staff to hire? So you're going to list your requirements, which are what do they have to know? What experience do they need to have? Maybe you don't need to have any particular experience, but maybe you want them to be a certain kind of personality. See here, I didn't just say education and training and experience and personal quality, but also personal qualities, including personality, because you don't want to hire somebody that has 3 years experience in the fashion business, right? Or has a certification in, I don't know, as a food handler, but you really don't think you can work with this person because of their personality. I mean, it's no fault of theirs or yours. It's just, there's some people you can work with and some people that you can't. So if somebody is really, and you have to be truthful with yourself, because at the end of the day, you're the boss, right? So they could be the best person in the world, but if they can't deal with your personality, right? And you're the boss, then you're gonna have a hard time, unless you want to hire somebody to deal with it because you don't want to deal with people, right? So, but I think that personality and the kind of person is very important. It's almost equally important, if not more important than some of the training and experience. So then you have to decide on schedule. Do I want somebody part-time, temporary? Do I want an intern? Do I want full-time staff? You know, and here's where you start thinking about, do you want a 1099 or a W-2? And then we'll talk a little bit about how that makes a difference in a minute in terms of how that adds to your company, all right? Or how that helps in your cash flow. All right, so, but you do need to decide on the schedule of how you want them to work. Sometimes it's an intermittent person. You want to be able to have them on call. Sometimes you want somebody there all the time that you can rely on them being there and supporting you, or sometimes part-time. And then you need to determine, once you hire this person, what are the kinds of things that they must have or bring with them that you're not, or that you have to provide for them. So some of jobs, especially if you're having deliveries, might require that they have a car, that they have a license, that you might have to check their license, making sure that they're not on a suspended license or have a lot of accidents on things. So you might want to check those things out. And then, do they come with tools? In some cases, if you're hiring somebody who's in carpentry, you know, and you just need that carpentry person because you're not a carpenter, you need to hire somebody who's a specialist in that. You want them to come with their own tools and specialized equipment. So you need to, so these are the things you need to, you know, sit down on a piece of paper and say, what do I want this person to have as far as experience and qualifications, education, certifications? what kind of personality do I want to deal with? What kind of schedule am I going to put them on? And what kind of tools and equipment do I want them to come with, right? So because that's going to help you not run into the trap that you interview somebody and they sound good and you didn't check all the boxes, right? And if that person can't check all the boxes, at least you know what the gaps are, and you have to be honest with yourself. Can I handle those gaps? Okay. So then you say, okay, I found these 2 or 3 people, or Joe recommended somebody, and Mary recommended this other person. I'm going to interview them, and they passed my interview on my checklist that I just did on their experience and what they have. And so now, if it's a W-2, you're gonna, and even if it isn't, sometimes you're gonna have to check on these things. So let's take a look at these background checks. Depending on the job that they're going to do, you might need to get a background check on this person. And there are services that you can find online, and I'm thinking that probably if anybody's interested, we can provide a list of resources or where you can get these things, or suggested resources. Background checks come in different flavors. Sometimes they're mandated by contract, a particular kind of background checks. But if you don't have a mandated contract, I would suggest that you do a background criminal check and avoid people who have felonies, unless you have the kind of job that it doesn't matter to you if they have a felony, if you know that person. But generally, we tell people up front, look, I'm going to do a background check. It's going to be a criminal check. If this is going to be a trusted individual that's going to be taking care of your accounting or your finances, you might want to check and make sure that they don't have big debts, or they haven't been taken to court because they owe a lot of money. Because somebody like that is a risk, because they might have a lot of temptation to walk away with some of yours. So those are things that you want to think about. Drug testing is generally something that's required by the transportation industry and the construction industry. I think the background check for me, the kinds of things I've run into, was sufficient, because if they had a felony that it was involved with, could have been involved with criminal activities, could have been involved with drug usage, abuse. But drug testing generally is required by some contracts that you have. Driving license and insurance requirements, again, if you need them to use their own car for their work, you want to make sure that they have a driver's license. If you want to provide a car, you still want to make sure they have a driver's license, and you want to check their background on driving record, because it's going to impact your insurance. Citizenship or visa requirements are primarily required if you're going to hire somebody as a W-2, as a wage earner, because and sometimes they're just plain old flat all required by contract, right? When it's federal money involved, especially. But the contract will stipulate that. On your own peace of mind, if you don't have a contract, but you have a W-2 that you hire, there is a regulation that you have to fill out a form, I think it's called a 9-9, that you have to verify with 2 pieces of IDs that this person is authorized to work in the United States and is not displacing a person that could qualify for that job. So this is not a preference. This is actually a legal requirement. And it's not the person that gets in trouble. It's you as a business owner who gets in trouble, because actually the IRS can shut you down if they happen to come over and audit and find out that you're hiring people who are not authorized to work in the United States. And we could talk more if you have more questions about visa requirements. There's a whole bunch of visas that people come in with that do allow you to work. In fact, there's even a seasonal visa. You can actually bring people in from the outside for the summer, claiming that it's a seasonal requirement. And that there's a whole world out there for this kind of requirement. But in general, I would suggest that you stick with permanent resident or an authorized worker or a citizen to do the jobs. You can sponsor somebody for a visa. That's a whole other thing. It's expensive, and you have to then make sure that you're complying with the letter of the law on that. Communication and language requirements. If you're hiring somebody to answer your phone, you have to make sure that they can speak very clearly, that they can be trained if they didn't come with the training already to talk to the general public or your customers, that they have, that they come with some skills, social skills, as far as being polite and, you know, being cordial. I think I've run, you guys probably have run into it, where you call some business and you get somebody who's really grumpy on the other line. That doesn't work very well for you, right? And or you call somebody and you can't understand what they're saying. So it's not because you have something against that particular accent. It's just that you need to make sure that you're communicating and understanding what they're saying in order to be able to interact with that business. Now, I run into this a lot because I deal with a lot of my business customers oftentimes are immigrants that were English is a language they're just learning or have just recently learned, and they have an accent, which, because I'm used to different accents, I generally understand it. But I also know that if the customer base is a broader customer base in the United States or in this area, you need that person who answers the phone to have very good diction and very good ability to speak clearly in English, because you can lose a lot of business if you don't, no matter how nice they are on the phone. Physical abilities requirements, you want to look at that, because if you need them to pick up things and carry things and transport things, then that's a requirement. You're not discriminating. You really have a requirement that they have to be able to lift up at least 30 pounds or 50 pounds or 100 pounds, whatever that requirement is. You should have defined that when we talked about earlier, what are the requirements for the job. You need to know that. So if the physical ability requires that the person climb up and down the steps because your office is on a third floor of a no elevator place and you need them to come into the office, that's a physical ability requirement. Dress code, this is funny because in my younger days, I said, why do I have to specify a dress code, right? And in my learning in my business, that's what I was hiring people, I understood that what I thought was an appropriate dress code wasn't necessarily what the other person thought. I actually saw, this is actually verges a little bit more on the occupational safety. I actually saw a man come in to work construction with flip-flops. And that's more on the safety side, but it's also part. Do you want somebody who's going to be interacting? Oh, I know. Here's another story. Do you want somebody who's going to interacting with your customers, but they are outrageous? Okay, whether they're out, they just think it's cool, but maybe they're outrageous. And I'll tell you my story. I sent one of my staff to interview the person we were hiring to work at a customer site. My staff member thought that the person was very qualified. They had the certifications. We gave them, it was an IT job. We gave them the IT test for the things we wanted them to know. They passed the test. I spoke to him on the phone. He seemed to be very, very good, very clear. He spoke very well and very courteous. And I thought, this is great. He spoke to the customer over the phone. So it was great. He shows up at the site. He's got chains. He's got a mohawk. He's got shorts, boots. Okay. And boots with spikes. and it just didn't fly very well with the customer. So you have to watch out those things, right? So we don't know because we don't see them, right? So sometimes we don't see them. So I think you have to make a point of seeing the person, and it's just really more for letting them know you can't dress like this, or you just, maybe if you're not going to look at them, you say, here's my dress code, right? And then you avoid all the people thinking you're just targeting them. Okay. And they have to have the ability to meet desired work schedules and get to locations needed. And I've had that experience too. Somebody was great, terrific. They had to work at Dulles Airport. They couldn't get there. They thought their sister was going to be able to drive them every day, and it turned out they couldn't, right? So you have to make sure that they have the ability to show up where they're supposed to show up and meet the schedule that you want them to meet. Some people are very eager to get the job, but they can't get themselves out of bed before noontime. Well, that's not going to work out very well. So you have to be very clear about that. So that was, that's what we had before. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions? This is a good spot to answer any questions you have for right now, because I'm going to get into the difference between a W-2 and a 1099.
I don't have a question. This is Marilyn. I don't have a question, but I do want to highlight what you just said about a dress code. Having something written down, whether it's dress code or any kind of policy, really takes away the accusation that you're picking on someone or that it's
Right.
personal. And it's something you can point to, something that you can say, when you were hired, you agreed to this. And it's much easier to monitor and make corrections if it's written down.
Absolutely. I think that's very, very, very astute. That's very clever. And that's what we need to do. We will mention the employee handbook and policies and procedures in a bit, but it's an excellent point. That's really a good point. Because people do feel targeted, or they can come back and say, you were discriminating. They could question your hiring practices because you meant the dress code, but they took it to mean that you didn't like the fact that they were British, right? Or whatever it was, right? So there you go. And that person, by the way, who showed up with all that stuff was British. So anyhow, employment versus independent contractors. So why should you hire W-2s? Why should you hire staff? Well, it gives you more reliability, stability, and better growth potential because they become part of your team. And if you're very good at team building and creating that sense of we're a team, you could do it with a 1099, but the 1099 generally feels a little bit more empowered about being an independent contractor, and they feel like, oh, I'm here today, gone tomorrow. Whereas a W-2 tends to be more feeling like they're joining a team. And to the extent that you can have your staff feel like a team, they can not just perform on the job you wanted them to perform, but have ideas and ways to help you that was really outside of just that specific task you wanted them to do. So you can also build a core team that can help you meet your goals. And so you can think about this. And in fact, this would be part of your business plan. You can say, what does my organization look like? Well, we all need go looking for customers. We need to figure out how to get more customers. We all need marketing. We all need accounting. We all need HR management. And we all need making sure that the work that we committed to is being done properly. So we have administrative work that we have to do, and we also have the actual operational work. So I would say you should at least look at people that can help you on the administrative side. You should look for them to be W-2s, right? You should look for them to be staff. And then maybe one or two people on the operational side to do the management of that or to oversee that. You should at least look at that. An independent contractor, you can't dictate by law, you cannot, you have to show, in fact, IRS says you must show that you are not controlling when and where they work. The reality is that you generally do, because you say, I want you to do this, and they show up because they want to get paid. So, but the IRS has been clamping down a lot on 1099s because they see it as a lot of people were using the 1099 venue in order to avoid being responsible, and a lot of employers, in order to avoid being responsible for the tax payments. So they're saying, if you have an independent contractor, you cannot dictate when and where they do the work. You can suggest, but you can't dictate. You also have to make sure, nowadays, you have to make sure that they have health insurance or workman's compensation. If they don't have workman's compensation, they're going to be on your workman's compensation, even though they're a 1099. By law, you're required to provide this workman's compensation. So since they're really considered their own contractors, they should have their own workman's compensation. What does that mean? That if they get injured, or health insurance, if an accident insurance, if they get injured on the job, on your job, you're liable for them unless they have their own workman's comp. So one of the businesses that we work with they hire a lot of 1099s that require the 1099 individual to purchase their own workman's compensation. That way, if something happens, it's on them and it's not on you to run around and making sure you're covering them. Also, workman compensation programs charge you more for a 1099 than they do for a W-2. Okay. So you have to make sure that they're covered. They have health insurance, they have workman's comp. If they're on a contract, they're considered a contractor, so they may need to comply with some of the terms of contracts that you signed. So the government sometimes says, okay, here's the contract, here's the terms, you have these insurance limits that you have to meet, you have bonding requirements and things like that. Some contracts require that your contractors, i.e. your 1099 individuals, are also compliant with some or all the terms and conditions that you have signed up. And also 1099 ultimately is more likely to be a threat to your customer base. Not that the W-2 couldn't be, but the 1099 tends to be viewed as more likely to be able to approach your customer base and sell their services directly. And we've seen this happen a lot of times. You have home repair people come in, and I've had this. I said, come over and paint my walls, and I signed a contract with company XYZ, and they're very happy, and they sent these people over, and one of them lags behind and says, here's my card, you can call me directly whenever you need this, right? Yeah, I'm sure most of us have experienced that kind of thing. Well, it's also can happen to you. Not that the employee couldn't do that. The employee, usually when you bring them on board, you have them sign a non-compete and a non-disclosure. You also have a non-compete and non-disclosure that you can have them sign with a 1099 person. It's just an agreement that they're not going to approach your customers that you introduce them to for a period of time after they leave your employment. But it's not very enforceable. So we don't want to tell them that it's not very enforceable, but the reality is it isn't. So and if it were enforceable, you'd have to be spending money with a lawyer to track them down. So it's difficult. So you have to be wary of that. If they're a W-2 and if they feel like they're part of the team, they're much less likely to do this. Any questions on this? No? Okay.
I do.
Oh, yeah.
Marilyn,
Yes.
I can't tell if people can see me. So can you start people as is it a
Yeah.
general practice to start as a contractor with the idea that maybe that you would bring them on as an employee? Does that tend
Absolutely.
to happen? Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that. You can bring them in as a 1099 and go. But here's the thing that I think that yes, it's, of course you can do that. You can bring them in as an independent contractor, then go to a W-2. offer them an employment arrangement. Generally, and we'll look at it when we're looking at money issues. When somebody is trying, because when we'll look at it in the money issues, all right, the independent contractor is generally getting, or they think they're getting more for their hour than the W-2. Because the W-2, you have taxes that you have to contribute and pay for that you don't have to for the 1099. So the 1099 person thinks they're getting more money for their hourly pay. Just like a lot of people want to start their business because they think their employer is paying them less than what they could get outside. It's the same thing with a 1099. What they're not looking at is the cost of doing business. What they're not looking at is that they have to now pay their own not only do they have to pay what it normally would have been withdrawn from their payroll for taxes, but they actually have to add to that. So they have to pay more on taxes. Because on W-2, the employer is paying some part of the taxes. So yes, you could. It's really hard because that person is getting used to getting independent pay. And so they're getting the gross amount, not with the withholdings. And so a lot of times they don't have the vision of the fact that this is a better deal to be on a W-2. So yeah, you can, but it's difficult. The other thing is if you have an employee and you want to switch them to an independent contractor, you have a difficulty because it's a red flag for the IRS. The IRS considers that a red flag, that you had an employee, now you're switching them to independent contractor. So these are things that, nobody tells you and you end up having an issue with that. Okay. Right. Okay, going over to the next slide. If I can figure out how to do this. Just what we were talking about. Here's the employee. Here's the employee. You're going to pay him $20 an hour. But now you think you're going to spend $20 an hour. Well, you're not, because now you have to pay an extra $1.50 for Social Security and Medicare, all that stuff. So you have to pay, in addition to paying them the $20 and withholding in a certain amount that you're going to forward to the IRS. You're, in addition to that amount that you're going to forward to the IRS, you're also going to pay an extra $1.50 on this person, or 7.5% of the employer contribution to that tax. Then you're going to have to pay workman's comp. And then these are just rough estimates because workman's comp varies depending on the kind of work you're doing. Some workman's comp is cheaper than other workman's comp. So if the insurance company feels that you're doing work that's more risky or more likely to get injured in, that workman's comp is going to be higher. If you have a 1099, well, we talked about this, this is the employee, right? On a 1099, you can actually cover with workman's comp also the 1099, but it's a little bit more expensive. But anyhow, so now this guy, you paid $20. Now you shell out $1.50 for your Social Security and Medicare employer contribution. Now you're going to have to cover them with workman's comp. You have to provide them with some holiday sick allowance, days off. Maybe you decide you're not going to give them anything. I don't know, but there's some laws that you have to give them something. So we have, let's just say that we're going to give them 10%. So oftentimes it's more, but let's just say it's 10%. So here's your extra $2. Other insurance that you might want to give them some benefit on other insurance. So what you can do is tell them, I'm just going to give you this $3 extra to you. You worry about your insurance, or you can offer a group insurance and then include them in your group insurance. So let's say it's $3 an hour for that person. And then unemployment insurance. So the state says you have to pay, and the federal, you have to pay unemployment in the state and in the federal. Let's just say that you're paying $10 extra for this guy. And then sometimes you have to provide them with equipment, supplies, other expenses. And so let's just say it's $160 a month that you have to provide, which might include a food truck if you want, or an office space, or sharing the expense of some equipment in the office. All right, so it's say their share is $1, so $160 a month. So now this $20 an hour person, you actually ended up spending $28.20 for this particular example. All right, could be more, depending, could be a little bit less, but roughly that's where you're at. Okay, so a lot of times people don't realize, they say I hired somebody at $20 an hour, they forgot that they had to pay all these other things. So here you are now, this independent contractor says, hey, I'm just going to do all that for $25 an hour. And it sounds really good to you because you were looking at having to spend $28.10 for that other guy that you're going to pay $20 an hour. So this guy's saying you can pay him 25, even though it's more money per hour. You think, what a deal. Except for now you have to remember that you have to make sure that this person has their own insurance, their own workman's comp, and maybe even their own equipment. So if they have all these things, then yeah, you pay them $25 an hour. But now what happens is that person says, what do you mean I have to cover that myself? Oh, it's not $25 an hour anymore. It's like $30 an hour, right? So now you have to see, was it more expensive to go 1099 or W-2? So, you know, the initial reaction is very deceptive because you're just looking at that number that you're paying, but you're not looking at the incidentals that you have to cover for this person. If that person doesn't have that workman's comp and they get injured on your job, then you have a liability. Okay, so remember that. The other thing is, when you hire an independent contractor, in order to make him a 1099, the IRS says that you have to make sure that this person is a regular trader in that kind of thing. They normally trade this way. That means that you have to either look at the fact that they have formed a company, that you're dealing with a company and not an individual, or that they are sole proprietorship, that have filed taxes before, or that they just created the company and they can show you they just created this company. And then if they did just create a company, or they don't have a company that they've created, you have to be able to say, I asked them and they showed me 2 invoices that they billed other companies the same way. So you do a burden of proof that this person is qualified to be a 1099 rests on you when you hire them, because the IRS has a lot of problems collecting money from independent contractors. So they're going to come after the employer to make sure that you saw that this is a person that normally is an independent contractor. Okay, so you'll need the contractor's credentials and a signed W-9 form for purposes in case you do get audited or asked the question. A W-9 form is simply a statement that says this person is operating as an independent contractor. They're using their social security number or another or a tax identification number, and their address of record is this. And so they just sign it. You don't do anything other than put it in your file in case you get audited. But that's the W-9. Okay. You just download, you go irs.gov, download that form, have them fill out, sign it, put it in the file. Now you don't have to do the I-9 verification for their ability to work in the United States if it's a 1099, because the assumption is that contractor is handling that issue because they're considered an independent company on their own, even though it's just one person. But you do have to have a W-9 on record. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, so an independent contractor, we talked about, needs to get their own general liability insurance. what does general liability insurance do for you? Does anybody have general liability insurance? Who's here?
We do, the chamber does.
Okay, Philippa, do you have?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
anybody else?
I do for
Okay.
my business. Yeah.
Okay,
I
All
do
right.
as well.
The umbrella policy, is that the same?
yeah, yeah. So what
Oh,
happens
yeah,
is,
we have that. Okay.
yeah, so what happens is if you go and do some work for Marilyn at the chamber, and she hires you to go do something, and and you send a person over there and they set her office on fire. She says, hey, I hired your company to come do it, and you set my office on fire. Let's put a claim on your general liability insurance. That's one thing that can happen. There's other things that it covers, but that's the one that always scares me the most, right? So they also cover theft. Sometimes they cover theft. Somebody came into our offices and stole our laptops, and the insurance company covered it and gave us the equivalent money on it. So that's what that is.
It also depends on your lease. Our lease requires it. So, and
That's
we,
right.
every year we have to send them our certificate of insurance.
Yes. And you get a certificate of insurance. Also, the insurance company issues a statement that says you're covered for these things. And they say that the person, this company that required it, may file a claim against this policy if needed, right? So that's the certificate of insurance that you put somebody's name on it, right? So a lot of contracts have that. The lease has it. Sometimes contracts that you sign with the government or even with a business have it. We ask for it. Sometimes we have a requirement from the government, from the federal government or the state to have general liability insurance. And if we have a subcontractor, we turn around and say, we want to be the people if your people are going to come over and work at our site, we want you to get general liability insurance so that we're covered, so it doesn't just go on our insurance all the time, right? So what if you send your subcontractors come in and damage our equipment? So we want to be able to get some claims there. Okay. So the independent contractor is required to keep licenses active. So you may be asking them in an agreement that you have. So a lot of times we get used to saying, hey, yeah, sure, come on board. Yeah, we don't have an agreement. Some of these things need to be in writing. So you need to write up, it doesn't have to be very fancy, but you do need to write up an agreement that says my company XYZ is contracting with you as an independent contractor. The expectation is that you have general liability insurance up to $1 million or 500,000 or 2 million, whatever you want. And then that, or if it's dictated by contract, it has to be what the contract says. And that you are going to be responsible for your workman's compensation and health insurance, cost of health insurance and workman's compensation. And also that you agree, because we're hiring you, because you have a license as a master electrician, you agree to keep that license active for the duration of the work that you do with us. And that if it does expire or lapses or is taken away, that you will notify us within 48 hours or whatever you want to say there. Okay. Licenses vary sometimes depending on the work you want them to do and what jurisdiction you're in. Sometimes it's city or county dependent or state dependent. And so you have to be cognizant about where they're doing the work. So if you have an electrician that has a master electrician certificate in Maryland, it may not be valid in Virginia, or they might have to do a request and equivalency certificate for Virginia. So somebody who has a license to do something in one area, you have to make sure that that license is valid in the area where you want them to work. Okay. So you also want to get them to agree to sign a non-compete and confidentiality agreement. When you hire somebody as an independent contractor, it's just basically a separate page that says you will not try to hire my staff and you will not try to try to enter into an agreement with my customer unless we have discussed it first and we have agreed on it. If you want to say that condition. And you also want to say any information about my company that you become aware of because we're doing business together, you will not reveal it to somebody else, because I want to say that that's confidential. Because you don't want to find out that you have a tax liability and then they go and tell your customer, oh, by the way, I have a tax liability. You might be working on that tax liability, but all they're going to do is they're going to say, you want to go and do business with me directly because that guy has a tax liability. You're going to be in trouble. So you don't want them to do that. So you want to have a confidentiality agreement, right? Or they might be privy on how you do your pricing or what your strategy is or how you plan to compete with some other company. And you don't want them going to that other company and saying, oh, I can tell you what they're going to do, right? So that's why it's important to have that confidentiality agreement. The other thing that the independent contractor has an obligation to you is to represent you when they're dealing with your end client. So when they're dealing with the end client, they shouldn't say, well, I don't know, I'm an independent contractor, so I don't know what they're trying to do, right? So your agreement has to say that when they're dealing with the end client, they're representing your company. They're representing XYZ company, not themselves. And then ultimately you want them to provide you with a timesheet, the status report, and a timely invoice, because some companies don't invoice you. And while that might be nice that they didn't invoice you, you might be surprised by an invoice that arrives a year later or 6 months later. And then you thought that they were just very nice and they decided not to bill you, but suddenly you get this big invoice and you're liable for it. So I think that they have to understand that this is something that you're expecting, that they're going to provide you with a timesheet, a status report, and timely invoice. None of these things need to be fancy. They can be as simple as an email, or you might want to have a more formal way of reporting time. Some of the payroll companies have these facilities where you can put in your time through a portal, or you can just ask them to send you an email every week telling you how many hours they worked and what they did for those hours, and that counts as a timesheet and a status report. And then you expect them to send you a timely invoice indicating what hours they worked for what, and what hours they're charging you for, and which hours they're not going to charge you for, because it's okay for them to do work for you that they have decided to volunteer. For example, they might decide that they really screwed this up and they want to do it again, but they're not going to charge you for the hours where they screwed it up. So if that's the agreement you have, they need to show, these are the hours I'm not charging you for, these are the hours I am charging you for. So if you have clarity on that, you'll run into less disputes later on. And the hired staff, well, very similar. They have to keep their licenses active. It may be that you're responsible to help them get those licenses active or keep them active or not, depending on what your agreement is with this individual or what your policies are, your internal policies. They also should sign a non-compete and confidentiality agreement because, like I said before, employees can steal your customers as well. And they also have to represent you when they're dealing with the end client. And you should ask them for a timesheet and status report. The difference is they're not giving you an invoice because you're going to use that timesheet to generate payroll. And here's where they should follow employer policies and procedures and handbook. And you should have a policy and procedures book or handbook, employee handbook, and those you can get templates for from there's a Society of Human Resource Management managers, and it was SHRM, which I will mention in the last slide, that does a lot of free consulting because they want to make sure that people know that they're available to help out small startups and small businesses. So there are a lot of templates you can get from them. But you need to take that template and make it yours. So don't just take it and not look at it, because, and some of those templates boggle the mind. They have like 150 pages, right? So you don't want to get that. You want a simple one. You want to make sure that you cover the points that you want to. Now you can write it yourself from scratch. It's nice when you have a template, because you might have not thought about something, and then therefore I'm going to show you something I have. So I use this, right? Maryland Human Resources Manual. I pay about $200 a month. A year. And they give me the manual on what the laws and regulations are for human resources. I will not sit and read this book, but I will use it as a reference because it has an index, and it also has templates in it. That's where you can avoid the problem with the dress code, as we mentioned, Marilyn mentioned earlier. You have it in your policies and procedures, a section called dress code. Policies and procedures, a section called timesheet reporting. Policies and procedures, meaning how to deal with customers. You know, those are the things. And policies and procedures also, because if there's any argument or any legal claim, if you have decided as a company, and this is where the United States has a lot of leeway on it. If as a company, you have decided that your regular practice is to do ABC, you have a lot of leeway to say my regular practice is to do ABC. And if the employee challenges that and says, oh, they didn't give, and we'll talk about this in a minute, they didn't give me any notice. They told me I had to leave next week. Well, our regular practice is that our jobs are at will employment. We'll talk about that in a minute. And this, I can prove it's a regular practice because it's in our employee handbook. Okay, besides, hopefully you have given them a job offer letter that says they're at will employment. And then you expect an employee to support other team members in the company and help people out when they need extra help. And it isn't maybe their specific assignment that they're hired for, but you need somebody to help out because you're short-staffed in a particular area, and employees ought to be able to step up to the plate. Questions? No? Okay. Okay, what are your obligations? Well, you know, these are pretty straightforward. You got to meet your payroll agreements and minimum wage requirements. I was trying to shrink this, so I don't know if I've said it someplace else. When you are hiring somebody as an hourly paid wage earner, you're also obligated to pay them for time and a half for overtime. And there are a set of rules of what overtime means, and that sort of thing. So you have to, it's called the FLSA. Felipa, did you say something? No, that's okay. I saw your.
I did, but I was talking to my daughter. I was like, oh no, am I not on mute?
No. So I noticed that were moving your lips.
Sorry.
Okay, and then you have to remit any payroll withholdings to the intended recipient, whether that's a 401k, whether it's a taxes, whether you have a court order that when Melanie gets a paycheck, you have to send $50 to the courts on every paycheck. That can happen. You can get a court order that says these people, happens with child support a lot of times. So you get a court order that this person you should forward this amount of money or certain percentage of their paycheck to the courts. So you have to make sure that if you did the withholding, that you're sending it to the intended recipient. And then you provide a statement of earnings and withholdings to the employee by the 31st of January for the preceding year. That means that you have to make sure they get a W-2 form that they can use to file their taxes. And then you also have to provide benefits that are legally mandated, as well as others that may not be legally mandated, but you have told them that you were going to provide them with. And those benefits should be documented in employee handbook, and it should be updated from time to time. So your handbook isn't something that's frozen in time. Your handbook can be updated. You just need to let your staff know that these updates have been made to the, yeah, you can't just put it in there and be secretive about it, right? You have to tell them, I made these changes to the handbook. And respectful communication, you as an employer, you should have respectful communication with your staff, and you should give them some performance evaluation, either whether you want to choose to do it formally or you want to give them feedback from time to time, so that if you're not happy with their performance, that they should know what performance standards you're using to measure them by. What they should know what you're expecting, right? What kind of performance you're expecting. And they should know when you think that they're doing great, and they should know when you think that they're not doing so great. It's preferable that it's in writing, so we all have an agreement of what those expectations were and what your assessment was. And I always like, before I give my assessment, I always like to ask people, what do you think? How do you think that you measured up to what these performance standards that we defined together were? And how do you think that this could be better in the future? Or if you did fantastic, do you think that we should tweak these performance standards? Do you think that they're not on target? Or how would you assess that? I always try to bring in the staff member in defining those criteria and helping me look at it from their viewpoint. You might have thought that they did a horrible job. Generally, what happens is you're thinking about what happened last month, and they're thinking about what happened over the last 6 months. So they did fantastic 3 months ago, but the only thing you remember is the fact that they wrecked some equipment. They broke down the copier last week with a stupid mistake. So you have to look at it throughout the thing. So that's why it's better to sort of do periodic assessments rather than wait a whole year, so that you're not just evaluating for the last month for the whole year. And you have to provide a safe work environment, right? So whether they're working at your site or whether you're sending them off to work in another site. So if you're sending them off to work at another site, you have to go and look at that site and talk to those people who are in charge of that site to make sure that this is a safe environment for your employee to work at, because you as the employer are responsible if something happens to that employee. They might, that other company might have their insurance and everything, but you are responsible to your employee. So that's what happens there. For contractors, you have to make sure they have an agreement that outlines the terms of the agreement. You should meet the terms of the agreement. Again, respectful communication is very important. You set the example for the whole company with respectful communication and privacy, right? So what you don't want to do is go yell at the employee in front of everybody else about what stupid idiot they are, because that doesn't get you anywhere. And it also sets the tone for what kind of environment you have. So you want to be respectful, have respectful communication, performance reviews. If you're boiling over, count to 10, step away, come back, right? Put things in writing when you don't think that things are being understood. So sometimes when you put them in writing, you can actually see them yourself and say, oh, do I really mean to say that? So that's that. Safe work environment, that's obligation to a contractor, that's 1099 as well. Training and orientation on work behavior expectations and on the internal software tools and equipment that is specific to the workplace. So if you're expecting them to use some equipment that they're not familiar with, but you have hired them to use that equipment, or that's something they have to do, you need to make sure that you have provided that training and orientation. And provide them with a 1099 form by January 31st of the amounts you paid the previous year. That's it. So that's that for that. Okay. Any questions? No. Wow. Okay. Employers required to comply with U.S. federal, state, and local labor laws. Yeah, federal, state, county, city. In that order. So minimum wage, federal, state, and local. Sometimes there's a minimum wage federal, but the county says if you have a contract with the county, your minimum wage that you have to pay these people are this. Now, if you don't have a contract with the county, then you can follow the state. If the state doesn't have regulations, the federal, right? So any sick leave, family leave, jury duty, and military leave, you have to allow that people get sick. If they get sick, they don't have to show up. You don't have to put up with it if they're sick all the time. You have to sit down and say, what are we doing here? Maybe, maybe you need to take some time off that I'm not paying you for, right? So family leave, I think what they're doing with family leave and jury duty and military leave is that they're asking you to allow time off that you don't have to pay for, but you have to offer them the job back if it's within a certain period of time. So family leave is hold their job open for them. Jury duty, you have to let them off the hook for those days that they have to be on jury duty. Military leave, I've had somebody in military leave, they went away for about 1.5 years. I offered them their job back. The US Army sent me a letter of thank you. It's actually, if there's a military call and somebody in the military reserves is in your employ, you have to offer them the same or similar job when they come back, unless you are no longer in business or you don't have work anymore. But if you do have the same level of work, you should offer them a position back. So workman's compensation is mandated by law. Federal Labor Standards Act is overtime rules for non-exempt employees. Non-exempt employees are wage earners. They're not salaried professionals. Salaried professionals are considered exempt employees. You don't have to pay overtime for them. They're generally making a lot more money than the wage earner as a salary, not necessarily, but it's just the type of work that you're doing, I think, mostly. Child labor rules, you have to make sure that the person that works either has a school permit, if the person is younger than 16, that says that they can work part-time, or if you're in a farm or on a horse farm. In the case of my child worked in a horse riding school at the age of 12, and it was considered a farm. So she could work there because the horse riding school was considered a farm. So she got to muck stables. Privacy of personal information rules, I think that's the law. You have to respect people's privacy. So you have to make sure that you're not discussing their health conditions with everybody else. And that you're not giving out their home phone numbers unless they have given you permission to do so. Background checks, again, there's rules about background checks. I think the newest rule is that you cannot, used to be you could run a background check before you made an offer of employment. Now you have to make an offer of employment conditional on the background check, but you have to make an offer of employment first. Pre-employment work permits and citizenship verification, that's part of what you have to do. You have to check and see if that person is allowed to work in the United States if you're hiring them, if you're hiring them as an employee. That's the I-9 form that says these are the valid identification pieces that you want to look at. You can look online at E-Verify. It tells you, I think E-Verify, there's a database they were trying to put together to see if people were authorized to work. You can put in their social security and see if they're authorized to work. But it's the I-9 form, and I think you can download that from online. I usually keep a few packets together because when they come on board, they have to fill out a W-4 form that says what kind of taxes am I withholding, how much am I withholding from their paychecks. for the federal, and then there's also a similar tax withholding form for the state. And then you have the you can't just run a background check unless they have signed off that they know that you're running a background check. So you have to have a piece of paper that says they're allowing you to run a background check. And then they also have to show you ID that proves that they're authorized to work in the United States. And then you have to fill out a form that says you saw the ID and you approved it. Any question on this? Any questions on this? Boring, right? But it's gotta be done. All right. And
Yeah,
I
I just
yeah.
want to chime in. Oh, sorry, my camera and my
Sure.
screen's different.
Sure.
I think that as an employer, this really underscores how complex it is to have employees on staff. And so it's not only the cost of the employees, but the regulation is as Carmen showed the book. So I think it's important before you hire or before you ramp up to know that there's a significant regulatory issues with hiring staff.
Right. But like I said, I think that there's also a good positive on hiring staff. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you can offload some of that burden from you and still hire staff. And that would be, at least on some of these things. I showed you the manual that I have on my bookcase. This is Maryland Human Resources Manual from the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. They issue a new one every year or every other year, they pretty regularly, because the laws change. But the other thing is, what I chose to do, regardless of what people said, oh, you can save money this way or that way, I chose to use a payroll company that has an HR component to it that advises me and handles most of these things for me. And so that's really cool. It doesn't cost me very much. And it's just awesome because I don't have to worry about a lot of this stuff. Okay, the company, so I don't leave you in suspense, the company I use is called ADP, right? So ADP Payroll Services, they have, they can handle all your payroll services. People can go on a portal and fill out. They even have modules that will do the application forms for you. They even have a background check thing. And then they have an HR component. You pay a little bit more for that. But you pay per person, right? Per employee. And it's just the cost, it ends up being less costly and more certain that you're doing the right thing than if you were to hire somebody to oversee all this stuff all the time, right? Then all you have to do is make sure that the timesheets are put in, that you agree with what you want to pay for payroll. You put in what you wanted to pay, and they track everything else. They even have a portal for the employees. If employees want to, or they're having a problem with sick leave, or they want to talk about what are my leave balances, or if they want to say, what do I do in this situation with my employer, they can go to a portal and they can get private consultation that is not unfavorable to you. If there's any issues with you, ADP will reach out and talk to you about it. So it's good. They're not going to call up the IRS. Oh, look what these people are doing. No, they're going to talk to you about it, and they actually work for you. They end up being your arm for this part. Okay. So we talked a little bit about at-will employment. Does anybody here not know what at-will employment is? I don't want to tell you something you already know. Who doesn't know what at-will employment is? Everybody knows what at-will employment is? Okay.
I think you might want to share with everyone.
Okay, I'll tell you anyhow. A good friend of mine who has a really fantastic business, and he's doing millions of dollars, one day called me up and said, I have a problem. I hired somebody and I had to let him go and they're suing me. They're suing me because when I hired them, I said they're going to work full time for me. And I had enough work for them to work for at least two years because I was going to put them on a contract that was 2 years long. And now they're suing me and they're not working out and I don't know how to get rid of them. Well, this is a person that did not have an agreement signed by the person that they hired that said that this employment was at will. So in the United States, you can offer something called at will employment. And what it means is that you don't guarantee employment and you are allowed to discharge the employee when there is no more work for that employee to do. Okay, this is important to differentiate for that employee to do. It didn't work out. Let's be friendly and say goodbye. So your job offer in writing needs to state that the offer is for at will employment. Also means that the person can leave at will. You can't sue them because they decided to leave and they haven't finished their 6-month assignment or a year assignment. You can't sue them for that. And at the same time, the reciprocal part is that they can't sue you if you need to let them go. So if your offer does not say it's not will employment, then the employee can file a claim if you let them go without their consent or they don't agree with your letting them go. So even though work is at will, it's also reasonable to provide them with some warning if it makes sense. Now, if they're total idiots and you think they're going to harm your business, you might want to say, you know, I want you to leave today. Maybe you're not firing them, but you just absolutely have no more work for them to do. It was all of a sudden the government canceled the contract. They didn't give. And by the way, the government can cancel a contract and not give you any notice. And it's all a different thing. You can have a claim to the contract saying they have to settle up with you, but they can in fact say, not doing this anymore. So you let the person go, that tomorrow, don't show up tomorrow. It would be nice if you gave them something like maybe a pay for a few days or weeks, whatever you can afford, whatever you think you can do. But you don't have to. It's not obligatory as long as they signed an at will contract with you. Okay. I usually, because I have a health insurance plan, I usually also keep them on the health insurance plan for an extra month. They always have the choice of paying for their own insurance plan. I usually pay for it for an extra month. Okay. Usually job offers that don't say that they're at will employment are meant to engage a person for a period of time with some guarantee of a period of performance, employment time, specific benefits and compensation, and stated payment or benefits that if you let the person go prior to that time period that you agreed on, you say, if I let you go before that, I agree that I'm going to give you this much or the equivalent of this much money or this much benefit. As long as you have an at-will employment, you're not obligated to that. But if you didn't say that they had an at-will employment, then, I mean, those words are like critical because on the claim, if the employee makes a claim and you have a letter signed by the employee that they knew that that shows that they knew that they were an at-will employment, then the claim gets dismissed, right? Some contracts state that the employee will forfeit the contract terms under certain conditions. This is on contracts that are not at will. If they're not at will, you have a contract. And sometimes you might want to do this just because you have somebody you really, really, really want on your team and they will not agree to an at-will employment because, or maybe you don't want them to have an at-will employment because you want to make sure that they're fully engaged and that they understand that they're part of the company. So if that's the case, then you have a contract with that employee and that says you'll forfeit this contract if you do not deliver these things, or if your behavior is like this, or if you break the law, or if you disclose corporate secrets, that kind of thing. So those are things that would be spelled out in the contract. Some contracts include an agreed benefit that the employee will receive upon successfully completing the contract term. Okay, this was for 2 years. You're done with the 2 years. I'm not giving you an additional contract, but I will give you this much money, or I will do this for you, or I will give you a trip to the Bahamas, or whatever it is that you decided to agree. Okay. Okay, we're coming to this part where I was trying to think about suggestions and resources that I want to make sure you walk away with, and that you are, if you think that you need something like templates or something like that, if you could just, if you can email me or email Marilyn, ask me for those, I'm happy to forward them to you, okay? So suggestion and resources: provide a written job offer that says that the work is at will and specifies an anticipated schedule and start date. And that when you give that job offer letter, it says, this is how much I offer you for money. This is what my anticipated schedule is, what I expect you to work these days or these hours. And I'm hoping that you can start on this date or no later than this date. And then you say, if you agree with the terms of this at-will employment agreement, please sign the bottom part of this letter and return a copy to me. The bottom part of the letter says, I, fill in the blanks, have read the offer letter, agree with the terms of the offer, and will start on dash date, because they might not be able to start on January 4th. They might want to start on January 15th. And then if that, and then they sign it, and then you get it back, and then you can call them back and say, no, you can't start on the 15th. I can't agree to this. Hopefully they'll have told you before they fill in the blanks. So, but anyhow, you have to have something that says that they agree with the terms and conditions of the letter, and that they have signed it, and they tell you which day they're available to report for work. Suggestion: use a payroll service that manages compliance with labor laws and does all the paperwork for you. That's ADP Payroll is what I use. So I recommend them. I've used them forever. They've been very easy to work with. The other thing I like about them is that, and there are other ones that are just as good. And I'm sure that some, we can get other recommendations out. You can give you comparisons. I like ADP because people know. So when I get a question from the Department of Labor, or I get a question from the IRS, and they say it's ADP, because they're an established company, and they're not just a new company that has just started that does this, even though the new company might be doing a fantastic job. Sometimes it helps me because since they know the company, they say, oh yeah, okay, I guess it must be right. And they don't look too deeply, because the assumption is that if ADP is doing it, it's probably okay. So I know doesn't have to be ADP, it could be something else. I know QuickBooks says they do payroll. I'm using QuickBooks, but I'm not using them for payroll. I'm sticking with my ADP. The other thing is that ADP has a way to provide workman's compensation that is directly related to your payroll and changes the cost because it's linked to payroll. So if you hire or you let somebody go, your workman's compensation fee changes automatically. You don't have to renegotiate a contract, or you don't have to pay workman's comp for the year on this many anticipated people. And then it changes and you have to redo your contract every time. In ADP, they have a feature where you can have workman's comp attached to it. They also have a 401k if you want to use it, which gives your employees a way of providing their own money for their own savings, pre-tax dollars. So they also have an HR support plan. If you have employees that have family members that are abusing drugs or alcohol, that's one of the areas. So they can actually, they have this HR support that they can go in and say, what can you give me a referral, or what can I do, or can I join some support group? That HR plan supports all those things, in addition to the very logistical things about well, how much leave do I have? And my employer is telling me this, and I think this, and what can I do? That's the HR support plan that ADP offers. The other thing is, I chose to enroll in the Society for Human Resource Management. Membership costs about $220 a year. I think it's 218, something like that. But they will, if you want to come over and talk to you, or come over and talk to the staff, or review what you're doing, or help you with an employee handbook, they will give some free time to you. If you are a small business, they will provide that. There are professionals there that are happy to do that sort of pro bono work. The other thing I suggestion is, don't believe everything you see online, and beware of scams. I've seen several organizations that say they'll do your payroll, but really they're really scammy. What happens when somebody says, I'm going to do your payroll, and they scam you? Well, you're giving them your bank account, and they're withholding money, and they may not be very good at, they might not even intend to scam you. They might just not be very reliable. And they might not send the money to the IRS where they were supposed to send it, for example. Some people just want to get your money, and then they leave you high and dry. So you have to be aware of scams. So I would say, if you see an offer that's really, really an amazing offer, check it out. Nowadays, you can do so much in looking online to see what other people say about different things. Okay. Okay, let's see. Don't seek the cheapest alternative. Sometimes that ends up costing you more. Sometimes people say, oh, I can do it for cheaper, but there may be some things that they don't cover that somebody else covers, like, you know, SRAM or ADP payroll or things like that, or your 401k plan, for example. So, you know, you have to be a little bit astute about that. It's just like when you sell your services. If you sold your services for less than what you think you needed to sell it at to make a profit and cover your costs, then you're not doing anybody any favors. You're not doing yourself favors, and you're not doing any favors to the buyer, because you're not going to be able to deliver a quality result. And then also reach out to the Gaithersburg-Germantown Chamber of Commerce, which is a great resource. They have a network of businesses that can give you advice. Some are in similar industries as you are. And it's good to go to the networking events, because you can exchange ideas and talk about issues that you might share. Sometimes you might not want to say that you have a particular issue, because it might be private. And but you can say, hey, I know a company that that a fellow CEO has this problem. I'm trying to figure out what I should advise them to do. And it's really you, but you know, you can say it like that. And then you can save face. But anyhow, that's what I got. I did get the request for templates. Thank you very much. I do need an email address. I don't know, Marilyn, maybe you want to share those emails with me.
Yes, I will. That's a good idea. I'll give you the roster. That's a very good idea. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So any questions that people might have? I know that this was a lot of information.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised you didn't fall asleep yet.
No. Well, we don't know about the people who aren't on screen.
Yeah, right.
But so the way that we structured the program is that we'll have the webinars, the workshops, and then we'll talk about the issues together in the next couple weeks. So and that's where we can start talking about specific issues and that you specifically might have, and start working with each other to help each other with advice. One of the things I tell people when we're in a chamber event is that everybody in the room is on a continuum, right? So some people may have been in business for 30, 40 years. Some people may just have the initial idea of a business. So no matter what problem you're facing, chances are somebody in the room, somebody in the chamber has already had that problem. So there's no, Carmen mentioned this a couple times, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. You know, there are resources out there, there are templates out there. And so this was a really great start on the kind of issues that as you grow your business and you want to expand, this is a great start because you know you can't do it yourself. Some of you are still in day jobs and wanting to transition to your business being your primary revenue source, your primary income source, and employees is a key to that. So Carmen, I don't know if you have any last minute.
Well, I was gonna, Penny had mentioned that she was thinking of hiring an intern for the summer.
Mhm.
And wanted to, I guess, ask whether they had somebody in mind, but there are different avenues you can take. There are a number of programs in the county that have either Montgomery College interns or high school interns, depending on what your needs are for what age group. I know that also WorkSource Montgomery has a place where you can get folks for short-term assignments as well as long-term assignments. And the chamber, my chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, has a mentored internship program for high school students from 16 to 21, which is an after-school program, or in the summertime, it's a short-term program for 16 to 21-year-olds to be able to support you. You don't have to pay. We fundraise to pay them their fee. And so those are sources that you can use. And I know that there's quite a few other ones. Marilyn, you're just as well aware of many of them. So if you are looking for short-term interns and you're interested in 16 to 21-year-olds or college students even, there's quite a few resources that you can reach out to Marilyn and get information on. Not that I want to put more burden on you, Marilyn.
No, that's good. Because I'm on the board of an organization called FutureLink, and it's college,
Okay, that's right.
Montgomery
Yeah.
College students, and the organization pays the student a
Right.
stipend. So
Okay.
you get the intern for free, but the intern's getting paid.
Right.
And so, yeah, lots of
that's what-
resources out there.
That's what we do. We pay the intern and you get the benefit of that. But at the same time, we're looking for you to provide some guidance and mentorship of the students as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, now's the time. And we know that we had some people that came in a little bit later.
Good,
So-
and then we'll remind me what the topic is next month. I can't remember.
That's a challenge.
I know.
It's a good topic. I remember
Good
that.
topic. It'll be very important, and we'll.
It's very important. I think all of you who are on this call, I hope that we'll be able to see you next month, because this Pathways program is really fantastic. The ability to come over and share this information, and if you can come in with questions, it's really even more interesting, because you can then bring in case studies or case examples of something that you might be struggling with or thinking about or wanting to get some answers in. So please bring those questions. It'd be great.
Good.
Yeah.
All right,
Can you
ladies.
share the name of the internship program again? Which one? The linkages one? The one that I have is from the Hispanic Business Foundation. It's called Partnership Youth Initiative.
Mhm.
And then the one Marilyn is talking about is called
It's
linkages.
good. It's free. FutureLink.
Future Link.
FutureLink. Yep. And FutureLink is always looking for placement for students.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And you have you have my contact here if you wanted to contact me anytime afterwards. Happy to respond.
Yeah, and I want to, I love the story that you told, Carmen, about knocking on doors when you were starting out. Please don't be shy about asking for help, right? Because there are people who are very willing to grab a cup of coffee, to share their story, to share their journey. And it's a really a very soft way to build those business relationships. Because even if they're not anywhere near your industry, entrepreneurs all face the same issues in terms of the issue of how do you grow, because it's a commitment to start adding staff, or when to quit your day job. You know, some of you have already figured that out, some of you haven't. I mean, those are tough things. And so don't be shy about picking up the phone and saying, can we grab a cup of coffee? My door is always open. So please contact me. I'm very happy to sit down and just kind of go over, help you brainstorm. So please make sure you do that.
Sure. And I don't know if Chris is still on the line. Is Chris still on the line?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
From Trippy Tacos? So I wanted to suggest, you said you wanted to expand into a store. If you had questions about how to move from food trucks to a facility, I know that Omar works with the restaurant, Omar Lasso from Los Chorros. He works with the Restaurant Association of Maryland. And he also does a lot of mentoring and helping folks out that want to expand their businesses in the food industry. So he co-manages Los Chorros in Wheaton with his parents, but he went out and got his MBA. He's very personable and very willing to help out. So if you want that contact, let me know. I'm happy to put you guys together.
I would really appreciate it, because I have been having trouble I've been looking at different spaces, but I'm looking specifically for like a second generation, just because it'll be a little bit better financially. But it's difficult to find because most of the places that are available are too big, because they used to be like sit-down restaurants, 200 seats plus, and I'm looking more for a smaller, like 1,500 square feet, carry-out, takeout type of location. But yes, if you could definitely send his information,
Yeah.
I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, and also you might want to consider, teaming up with a restaurant that might have a corner that they want to give you to do your piece, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
that-
true.
Yeah, that's, you don't necessarily want to go it alone because the space is still expensive, even though they should be reducing all the costs, right? But, and where do you live?
Germantown.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'll send you some information on that. And then,
Okay.
and then the other person anybody who wants to ask me questions, I'm happy to help out. The Rachel, because you said you were in IT, right? Is Rachel, no, it's Erica. right?
Erica's in IT.
Erica.
Yes.
Erica, so if you have any questions on doing RFPs or getting work from the feds, anything like that, I'm happy to. Although do we have that event, Maryland? Do we have that on our pathways?
Which one? Sorry.
Procurement?
No, but it's interestingly enough, one of our events committee, we've had procurement through the years, and our events committee just started talking about bringing that back. Yeah.
Okay, because I have a heck of a lot of experience in helping businesses do proposals with the federal government as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyhow, so just Erica, I just put that out there in case you wanted to be included in some of the conversations we have with that.
And Carmen,
aspect.
can we get the slides out to everyone?
Sure, I'll send them to you. You can send them out. Is that good?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay, right.
Okay,
Okay, and then I know that you have a recording.
I do.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. I've got to make sure I don't not like turn it off and not get it. But yes, I do have the recording.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much to everybody. Thank you, Chu. Is that how you say it? Chu? Is
I
that
think she just had
CHOU?
to jump off. She,
Yeah, yeah.
Zhu with a,
Chu.
Yeah.
And Rachel and Rosenda and gosh, Penny and Marilyn and Patrice.
and I'm so
everybody.
happy because when we thought about this program, this is exactly the what we wanted is a group of women and minorities who are ready to take it to the next step, ready to get support, and I'm excited for the year to provide the support that you need to really do what you set out to do.
Well, thank you so much, Marilyn. I really appreciate the opportunity to share.
Great,
Thank you.
and we'll see Carmen, we'll see you next month, and then the participants, Stephen will make sure that you are in your resource group.
Great.
Great,
Thank you.
okay. Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
I'm gonna-
You too. Bye.
This is very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.